Welcome back. This week we're talking about research. And you say, research. That's my business. Research is my business. Why are you telling me about research? And I hope that's true. And I trust it's true. That we've got a lot of master researchers in this course. And so what I want to talk about is the research process. I'll go over it, and I'll go over it as efficiently as I can, looking mainly at examples. But what I think I can offer you is a trick. And some people might call it a shortcut. I would never call it a shortcut. And if you try to tell anybody that I called it a shortcut, I'll deny it, even if there's video evidence, and I will go on, and because I control the YouTube site, I'll take down that evidence. So this thing that we're not going to call a shortcut is a way for you to get to the foundational texts in the field that you're looking at, whether it is space exploration, whether it's sanitation, whether it's better processes in a hospital, whether it's geothermal energy in residential homes. Whatever you're looking at, it's a trick, a shortcut that we're not going to call a shortcut, for getting you to the best research, getting you to what we'll call the canon, those foundational pieces in a field that you need to know about. Okay, let's go. Superfluous title page. You know what you're watching. Today, right? Research, we're still at the pre-drafting stage. We're talking about strategies. We're talking about finding sources and tracking sources and evaluating sources. We're going to focus primarily on the first three. The fourth one I'll touch on, give you a few hints about what we're going to talk about through the next 2 or 3 lectures, which focus a lot on evaluating and synthesizing sources. So we've talked, there's all sorts of different ways about thinking about the stages of writing. Here's one which I like. I've referenced it before, the POWER acronym. So planning, organizing, writing, editing, revision. And at each stage, there's a slightly more advanced document. You've moved yourself ahead by researching, by drafting, by beginning to edit, by doing revisions. But we're always doing all of these, right? You're even in the planning, pre-drafting stage. If the spirit strikes you, write it down, get it down. If you're in the editing stage, you may have to go back and begin reorganizing and finding other sources and doing additional planning. So there's no any division between these. There is a certain linearity to it, but it is artificial for the sake of talking about it and talking about best practices. Credibility and content. I can't say strongly enough that you need to be systematic. There's jokes about pressure creating diamonds and people being able to pull rabbits out of hats at the last second to create great documents. And some people can do it, but many of them do a bunch of preparation behind the scenes that they never tell anybody else about, so they look more spontaneous and look more creative than they actually are. They are usually people who are doing tons of very systematic preparation. So when we talk about building credibility, the text talks about a few things in relation to competence. And I like this. This is, text talks about unconscious incompetence. And this is, what would we say, maybe 95% of what's on the internet, right? People who don't know what they don't know, and most of them are quite happy to tell you what they think and what you should think, and spout off and blame each other and just act like digital hooligans. Unconscious incompetence. You don't want to be there. I'm sure you're not. There's conscious incompetence, and this is where you suddenly have an epiphany and an awareness of what you don't know. you begin to realize that there's a whole lot out there that you need to research and evaluate. And as you do that, you move into this conscious competence. And this is generally where you're going to be if you've taken on a project on a topic that's new to you in this course. Some of you are taking on projects that relate to things that you've done in other courses. Obviously, you can't use material from other courses, but you can certainly use topics and ideas and research that informs your investigation in this course. Hey, there's a plane going by. Okay, so conscious competence, and this, you are building expertise, but you're still leaning heavily on sources and checking sources. Where we all want to end up is at unconscious competence, and that is where you know your field inside out, so in such a way that you don't really need to think about it. You don't need to do a whole lot of preparation before going in and delivering a talk on something. You are an expert. It is part of you. You are working in that field all the time, and you understand how your field, and you understand how your field fits with other fields. So that's that interdisciplinarity. And this is where you really begin to feel comfortable and your stress goes down. You're an expert. And we've all met people like this, and this is where you want to go. So this project is maybe a stepping stone for you heading in that direction. Heading in that direction, there is a mountains, like those mountains out of Lord of the Rings, that you have to go over. The amount of data out there it's almost unfathomable, right? Zettabytes of data. Google's processing petabytes every hour, maybe more at this point. It's hard to track, and things are growing so fast. So how does this relate to research? Well, academics, we get career advancement through publications, and there's obviously a big push for quality, but there's a simultaneous and I would say not great push for quantity, right? That you have to publish, so people take the same research and write a little bit on one article about that research. They write one little bit in one journal, they write a little bit in another journal. So the amount of research, the number of journals is growing every year. I won't say it's exponential, but it is almost unmanageable. And so that's why this research process is so vital. And so you have to have a good research question, because your argument at the end of your project, right, you have a research question, you come up with some various ways to solve it, and at the end you make a recommendation. Well, that recommendation is an answer to your research question. So an ill-formed research question can lead to an ill-formed conclusion and recommendation. So having that strong research plan, knowing what you're looking for before you wade into the thousands of journals and hundreds of thousands of articles that you could access, that's paramount. Finding credible sources, tracking them, keeping, not having, at the last minute you're trying to create a bibliography and you're like, oh, gee, where did I get that from? Where did I get that from? You don't want to end up there. And you want to evaluate others' arguments and research in a sophisticated way. And so doing good research makes that job easier. When you trust that the research you're looking at is credible, your analysis becomes more credible. All right, step one, in big writing, research strategy. We've talked about identifying the purpose and the audience. Is your audience broad or specific in scope? It will depend on the scenario that you've built. And so as you develop your research question, it's going to change through the semester. It's going to change. Each piece of research you do should either confirm your research question, confirm that it's a good one, or cause you to meddle with it a little bit, change it a little bit. And that's good. And you're going to have all sorts of questions that come up, and your job, right, as the emerging expert on your problem that you're investigating, is which are the overarching questions? What is the key question? What are sub questions in my problem? And you want to narrow that down. So let's look at this for a second. Some key points on a research question: make it clear, focused, realistic, manageable. How effective are hybrid and electric rigs? Right? Let's say you're working at a trucking company. You've been brought on for a year to help them evaluate alternatives that will be profitable. That the company is wanting to make some sort of a green shift. It's recognizing that the amount of diesel going into the atmosphere from the trucking industry is enormous. And there's also a marketing side to it, right? If does this trucking company, is it worth being seen as a green company? Is the cost of this moving to electric rigs? Does it balance out? Are you gonna build enough of a reputation, and is it gonna increase business enough to warrant switching? And period, can you switch? Are electric rigs for long haul trucking, are they even feasible at this point? So your first question is, how effective are hybrid and electric rigs? Pretty broad question. So a better one: should our company switch to rigs that use electric or hybrid power? Better. Are there drivers in our company who should adopt rigs that use electric or hybrid power? Now you're starting to disaggregate a little bit, because a trucking company is going to have short haul truckers, they're going to have long haul, they may have a local delivery service with a 5-ton truck that drops stuff around town. So now it's not a company-wide switch, because you have to remember this question is what is going to entice or scare away that decision maker immediately above you and above them. So you're disaggregating. So you're building your credibility. You're showing that you understand that maybe the whole company can't adopt it, but maybe there are some other drivers in a company who could adopt rigs that use electric or hybrid power. But you can still, if you want to guide your own research, make the question more specific. So here's your best question: under what geographical and travel conditions do electric and or hybrid rigs make financial, ethical, and reputational sense for our company? So now you've got a question that actually identifies the bodies of literature that you're going to engage with. So you're going to look at how electric or hybrid rigs work for different geographical regions. A company in Saskatoon, right, who's running to Alberta and to Manitoba, right, fairly flat. A company running out of Revelstoke in British Columbia to the Rockies, much different needs. Right? It's potentially a different truck and a different assessment. Does your company work in the southern part of the U.S. and they rarely see snow down there, and it's a huge deal, and they lose their orange crops, right? Or are you an ice road trucker? maybe that's the company you've signed on with, and you're going, your trucks travel across frozen rivers in the winter. So you can't have this open-ended how effective are hybrid and electric rigs. It needs to be tighter than that, and it needs to be more specific. And it's a mini roadmap for yourself. So spend time working on that research question. Once you've got your research question, do as much brainstorming as you can. I almost called it brandstorming. That doesn't sound good, does it? So brainstorming, definitely brainstorming. You want to do as much and as wide just a creative explosion as you can around ideas, questions, creating diagrams, free writing, whatever you can do, and then begin to organize that mayhem, that chaos, into something that is a plan. And with steps and sub-steps. And this blueprint, we'll call it, is going to change. And I urge you to save as, and back up. There are all sorts of free online backup software you can get. There's obviously physical backup, and then what you also want to do is have a record of your changes. And I know that some Google Docs does that in an okay way. Some of these online backup systems do that. They have iterations going back in time, but really the safest thing is just to save a new copy, put the date on it, and keep it as a record. And then if you delete a bunch of stuff and a week later you realize, wow, that was gold. Wow, I had some great insights. Why did I delete that? No problem. You don't have to hope that Mozy or Google Drive or anything worked. Hopefully it did, but you've got that document sitting there. Step 2, finding sources, and I'm combining it with step 3, tracking your sources. And this is primary research. This is very basic. It's original research. If you go out and do research, if you experiment, if you tinker and keep track of it and do it in a very scientific way, publish it, you got primary research. Secondary research is what most of you, I'd say the great majority of you, are going to depend on. In fact, all of you maybe. This is information researched by other people and opinions by other people, and hopefully opinion with evidence from other people. And there's no limit on what you use. In the proposal, we just indicate that it's got to be reputable. That's all. And so when you start to go look for information, all you need to worry about is reputable. And so the other side of it is it reputable, and have I looked in a way that shows that I understand the technical and the organizational problems related to my scenario. So don't get caught up just with something in a website with information on it. If we're going to continue with the example about the electric rigs, factual material is great, but you really want to show your supervisor, that decision maker, that you understand the state of the art, the technical field. So I urge you to, and I will show you in a moment, how to dig into the scholarly work in a quick way, but not a shortcut. When you go looking for research, you have to acknowledge your own bias. And so sometimes that might be, in this example, let me use a crude example, is you might think electric is a total fad and that it will never be adequate for the trucking industry and the weight and just the incredible demands on the engines and the horsepower that's necessary. Maybe you think it's not going to go. So that's your bias. Another kind of bias is where you you're open to say electric rigs, but you've already decided that hybrid is the way to go, and you've already you're pretty sure that's what you're going to recommend. Electric seems a bit far-fetched, too far off. These are all biases, and it's not that they're wrong. It's great to have opinions, and better to have opinions with evidence. It's okay. You have bias, but what you need to do is look critically at yourself and say, is my bias leading me to include certain sorts of evidence that support my view and exclude material that might contradict what I want to recommend? And that's what we talk about confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is where you just go out and you look for research that confirms what you already believe. And it is dangerous and it is widespread. It's a plague on academia. It's a plague on professional fields. It goes on. It happens everywhere. From those people who have unknown unknowns. Most of the internet who just go out and look for people who tell them what they want to hear. There's a great example around autism and immunization. Right? There's some pretty good evidence that there's a lot of people who just are engaging in confirmation bias. They will only read what they what confirms what they already believe, and so don't do it. Try to really play the devil's advocate and and go out and actively seek. Right, that's the term I use. Actively seek out people who take a contrary position and try to read it in as open-minded a way as you can. Okay, let me get to the library. You hopefully have done a tour in some class. You hopefully have been there. Let's look very specifically and quickly at what you can find that will help you finish your project in this class.